I just sat down with two friends of mine, RedBeardFlynn and MarleMMO, to discuss the state of the MMORPG genre, and the results, the discussions that were had, were honestly not what I expected. What are both of your respective introductions into the MMO genre? Because mine, I'll go ahead and start here. Mine is almost Tales of Pirates, or Pirate King Online. It was a top-down isometric open world PvP dungeon MMO where you would enter dungeons, you grind for gear, and you could combat other players. They could kill steal you. They could, right when the boss was about to die, they could come in, swoop in, kill you, wipe you, then steal the boss drops and everything. And it made for one of the most incredible experiences for me because I was a big competitive guy. I loved PvP games, loved PvP MMOs, so that was my introduction to it. And it was also an anime MMO, which kind of was the driving force of my channel originally. 2004.
Okay.
Yep.
So that sounds like there's a lot of echoes to Ultima Online's design doctrine, but skins in a slightly different way.
Well, I was gonna say, like, that this is just gonna age me because my first MMO was Ultima Online in 1997, you know, and it was a very interesting game because it was about as hardcore as you could get. Like, the NPCs would loot you when you died. Like, died, you turned into a ghost, you had to go find someone to res you, which could take hours, your corpse would decay, but you got this little message that said, a Lich Lord rummages through your corpse and takes an item. And it's like, that's like it's just added insult to injury that this NPC that just murdered me is now looting my shit.
Kicking you when you're down, yeah. Brutal design.
No, that's
and then
crazy.
Obviously EverQuest, oh wait, there it is. EverQuest came next after that for sure.
Yeah, my foray was EverQuest, Kunark expansion. I remember I was at my buddy's house. I actually wonder if he's gonna watch this video and be like, hey, I remember playing with that kid in the neighborhood. I watched his dad. He somehow was able to secure the name Brunner Battlehammer from D&D.
Oh, nice.
He was kicking a giant to death. But with people online. I was like, how is this even possible? And he's like, oh yeah, it's EverQuest. And what's EverQuest? Then so he hops on another character and he's walking through Kelithin and a druid turns him into a wolf or something, completely blowing my mind. Because at that point in time, other than maybe like AOL Chat Messenger or something, like playing games through a network with other people in which other avatars aren't NPCs, like there's agency other than like AI behind some other character doing things, completely just ruptured what I thought was even possible. So that sucked me in. I presume that was around 1999, and completely just blew my conception of what was possible from a gaming perspective.
Damn, so you guys have been playing for longer than I have then.
I might have a couple of
my knees hurt still too.
Oh really? So you guys have been around then for literally every major MMO release and the entire evolution of the genre then. Dark Age of Camelot, RuneScape, and then the introduction of World of Warcraft, which revolutionized, for better and for worse, the genre.
Yeah, it was a crazy time because I still remember, I think like at my time there was a time period, I kind of call it the golden age of MMOs because it was when like companies were just trying shit. Like they were just seeing, okay, what sticks to this wall? So you had like Star Wars Galaxies, which was like, what if you could make your own city on all these planets, but you actually had to survey and prospect for minerals and all this stuff, and had PvP, you could tame a Rancor, like they had all that stuff. And then Ultima Online was this like no holds barred PvP, like, and then loot everything, lose everything MMO. And then EverQuest was a D&D inspired, like it was that time frame when all these MMOs were coming out that were vastly different from each other. And then I remember 2004 hit, and I thought EverQuest 2 was gonna be the next big thing because it had like next generation graphics, the animations still stand up today, but they swerved into this idea that processors were gonna be single core forever. And then they weren't, and so it didn't work. Like the game just struggled on every PC, and then World of Warcraft came out 2 weeks later, and just everything changed from there. Everything changed, and I was just like, oh, things are different now.
You hit the nail on the head. That early almost 7-8 year period was marked by innovation, And if we think back to the kind of embryonic form of MMOs being MUDs, multi-user dungeons, I believe they started back in like European universities, in which computer scientists just wanted to play D&D but through a network. So like they had no graphics. It was just like Linux, CLI, you know. And so the question at that point was, well, how do you innovate here? So then you end up getting like Meridian, I forget the like 59 or whatever. You put graphics on it. Well then, well, how do we iterate on this? Well, you make it dynamic. You get Ultima Online. Oh, well, how do you expand from here? Well, you have EverQuest, and okay, well, how do we turn this on the head with respect to, you know, cross-player competitiveness? And you brought up Dark Age of Camelot with this just completely paradigm-shifting PvP-oriented way. Well, how do we innovate on this? Well, let's make it slightly more accessible. And you have World of Warcraft, and it's at that point at which the hint's already been spoken, at which the genre, and we can maybe tease out some of the details here, that over this period of rapid innovation, testing, experimentation, formula was discovered that worked. And in terms of better or for worse, we're now living in the shadow of what that optimized formula and strategy is, with different explorations in different facets, and also different children genre being born, like survival, gacha, more mobile-centered games. But I think one main hallmark of that first crescent into the golden age of MMOs was that dedication and risk to innovate.
Yeah, now developers just don't care anymore. Like,
yeah,
I know that there are plenty of indie MMO devs out there. There are lots of mobile devs out there. Everyone is trying to make something that both people want to play and that is also going to be largely beneficial to them in terms of revenue, like financially, because every game needs to make money. But at the same time, it seems like there are two different mindsets that companies have, and that is, on one hand, this is what people used to want, you know, 20, 30 years ago. So, you know, they attempt to make this game, and unfortunately with the mindset of today's gamers who want, you know, instant gratification, instant satisfaction, they just want to, you know, they want to play something incredibly casually, but they also want, you know, a game that's filled with content. And then you have the other mindset, which is we just want to heavily monetize everything and introduce the most predatory business models possible, which are, I mean, mobile MMOs that are minimal time investment, minimal quality, minimal innovation. I mean, what the most popular mobile MMOs are still Lineage, Revolution, and like the most basic autoplay, auto-pathing, auto-garbage the genre has to offer. And they came out, what, like 5-7 years ago? And then we have games like Grand Saga. I don't know if you guys know any mobile MMOs. We have games like Grand Saga, Odin Valhalla Rising, Project Ragnarok is coming out that had Moonlight Blade mobile, Revelation mobile. All these games are the same game. Like literally, they look pretty much the same. They play pretty much the same. They are horrible. And I mean, they still make hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's atrocious, it's disgusting, it's abhorrent, but yep. So they're Diablo the two different, right? Yeah, dude, Diablo Immortal, goddamn. People are, and I mean, I don't mean to offend people, but God, some people are stupid.
Well, it's the WoW effect. Take it, and arguably you can make this argument broader than just the MMO or even gaming niche or industry, in which you find a formula that works, and there's this strange juxtaposition. And I think we should make a distinction between devs and the companies that employ them and the publishers, because they're ultimately, they have different drives, different ambitions. And so, for example, from an engineering point of view, if you grow up and you want to make games, and then you suddenly find a job that's willing to pay you hopefully enough to make rent, and then suddenly your senior engineer is telling you that, hey, this is the only way that our, you know, whether it's a sprint or agile model, whatever that ends up being from a development point of view, that you don't have a lot of design agency in what the end product may look like. Obviously, it depends on game to game, studio to studio, industry to industry. But oftentimes, I presume, it'd be interesting to actually interview some game devs. I guess I have, but most of them have been indie, so they've had more autonomy. Yeah. But I presume that just like us, many game devs themselves also mourn for the same reasons.
Well, I can only and this is my experience with the industry is very, very limited. It is all basically indie people, because that's who talks to me, is indie people. But essentially, like, I can always compare it to my second career as an author, right? So I was trying to go the whole traditional route of publishing and everything like that. And when you go that route of adding in more people, more decision makers, there's more people telling you how and what to do and making all those decisions above you as you work on smaller parts of it, right? So you've got this book and then like, okay, well, we got to change the title. Okay, well, we got to change this. Well, we got to change this. And so that's what I think a lot of people miss in like an MMO genre and stuff like that, is the devs creating the game, like the people working on animations, the people working on coding, all those people working on those parts of it, they don't have any choice or decision making in how much the game costs or how it's marketed, or maybe, you know, changing whether or not New World is marketed as an MMO to an action RPG. You know, they don't get to say that. They're below those decision making things. And so that's one of the things, like, I really like humanizing game developers, because it's a big decision making, and the bigger the company gets, the bigger the decisions. More
Especially
people.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the humanization part of it, and I also think that the risk factor, the tolerance for risk is important here, because early in the MMO genre, in which it was an undiscovered kind of continent in a way, there was fog of war. You know, how much of this pie can we extract? So the risk tolerance was really high for innovation. There's also a lot of ignorance, because no one knew how complicated these types of games are to make. No one knew that typically MMOs take years and years and years to develop, unlike a FIFA where you can just kind of reskin it year after year after year. And so now with hindsight, we're like, to make a competitive MMO cost tens of millions of dollars. I mean, the obvious target here is Star Citizen. It's like almost $1 billion. It's basically still alpha, right? And that's kind of maybe that's an extreme example, but even something, you know, maybe Pantheon or you can maybe just think of Camelot Unchained.
Ashes of Creation.
Ashes of Creation, where now that we have a bit more know-how from an industry point of view, investors are now they have the physical, or not physical, the fiscal reports, and they know how much this costs. They know what the ROI is, and from their perspective, if they're the ones funding this, they know the model that works, and then that ends up bleeding all the way down to the consumers, us, in this post-innovative age in which we objectively, this is a weird statement, objectively, the MMO genre now is better than it's ever been, but it's subjectively the worst. What I mean by that is, now we have more options. You know, how many versions of WoW do we have? How many emulated servers? You can pick which era of EverQuest you want to play. There's new innovation on the horizon with respect to some of the server-side technology that Ashes of Creation is exploring. From a graphics fidelity perspective, you can have any art style. But from a subjectivity point of view, like we talked about early on, like I mourn for the current state of the genre, because that hope, the expectation of something new around the corner. Like, I remember early 2000s, there was like a new Asian MMO to try every single week. It was so fun.
Yeah, there were. I hopped between them monthly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
me too.
Yep.
That was so fun and exciting. And now we have history to look back on, and, you know, on one hand, I cherish growing up in the MMO age, but unless someone reinvigorates the formula, and I don't personally know how to do that, we're left almost, you know, having done the same hike 1,000 times.
Although, speaking of MMOs releasing seemingly every week, I mean, that seems to be the case with mobile MMOs. So, I mean, realistically, studios seem to have, you know, at least stayed true to that. We have, you know, mobile renditions and incarnations of old MMOs. We have like Aura Kingdom Mobile, we have like Grand Fantasia Mobile, Eden Eternal Mobile, then more recently Moonlight Blade Mobile, Revelation Online Mobile, and then there are, I mean, my wife has a Google Doc file where she has, I think, a list of every single MMO that is upcoming, and there are probably like 70 or 80 games there, and at least 45 of them have either mobile functionality or are mobile games as well. So there has been a very large shift, because we still have the, you know, the big MMOs, Guild Wars, WoW, ESO, BDO, and everything, and we've had some MMOs that have released to varied fanfare, like New World, Lost Ark, and then more recently Throne and Liberty, which I mean, I wasn't a big fan of myself, but it really didn't, make any waves. It kind of just like released and then just kind of faded into obscurity almost overnight. But
that was the biggest like confusing moment for me. I made a prediction that it was going to be bigger than New World, and then seeing how it, I mean, it's weird to say an MMO that hits 300k or 400k players flopped, but flopped because, I mean, 12 years of development on that game, switching from a top-down ARPG style MMO that used the Lineage IP into what it was and everything like that, and just seeing like just not even hit the same, like a fraction of the numbers that New World hit or Lost Ark hit was very surprising to me. Eye-opening.
Not only that, but they were also running off of the Lineage IP, as you said, which was an established intellectual property that literally had tens, hundreds of millions of players over the last like 20 years. It's unreal that they only managed such, and as you pointed out, 300, 400k really isn't a low number, but comparatively, that's a fraction of 0.01% of their total potential player pool that might have been interested in it. So it's wild that it did so poorly comparatively. But what do you guys think that about the current state of the genre, given how many mobile MMOs are coming, given how, for all intents and purposes, the genre has stagnated? Yeah, we have 17 different versions of WoW, and there are 500 different private servers for every MMO. What do you guys think about it right now, though, overall?
I think there's kind of an interesting state, because I think that we've been like probably for at least a good 5 to 10 years, we've kind of been like in the post like major investment part of it. Like we're in a place where the two of the biggest MMO companies historically canceled their big MMOs. EverQuest canceled EverQuest Next, the game that was going to be revolutionizing everything back in 2016, right? It was going to be kind of Minecraft-esque. It was going to have AI companions all the way back then, and they killed it off. And that company kind of had to like go through a whole stage. And then Blizzard killed off their MMO, made it into Overwatch, and then they killed off their survival MMO. So all these big companies are deciding, no, this doesn't work. And then more recently, we just found out that Dune Awakening, which was kind of like the writing was on the wall, is not really an MMO. It's more of a survival game with extra server infrastructure, right? Like you've got 40-player servers that go into hundreds of players with one big area, and it's more of a lobby-based. Project Ghost seems like a lobby-based type of thing, and I think that it's an interesting place where all that the giant MMO I think is gone. I think we spent about 10 to 15 years trying to chase WoW, and like maybe one MMO like Final Fantasy 14 succeeded. Everyone else failed in trying to reach those numbers, and I don't think we're going to get that 2 million player MMO sustained anymore. I don't think the genre can even house that. I think the genre is too sticky with players anyway, and trying to hit those numbers is unsustainable. So I think we're probably going back towards a smaller MMO genre, like Mortal Online 2, a couple thousand players and they're happy, maybe a couple hundred at this point. And that's what they're aiming for. Sustainability, I think, is what more MMOs are going to be starting to aim for, rather than like mass profits, which means more companies are not going to look at the genre. So it is, I think, going to fall more towards indie or like bootstrapping projects. But I do have one game that's kind of in a weird space that I think could potentially break all that, and that's Stars Reach, because of the audience that they're aiming for. They're aiming at an audience that may have never played an MMO before, and I think that kind of aim has the potential to really explode if they can handle it. I don't know how their server infrastructure and everything is going to work out, and they're very ambitious, so
I'm very much looking forward to Raf's new adventure in Stars Reach, because he was the brainchild of Ultima Online. He's been in the genre since its infancy. He was the brains behind Star Wars Galaxies, so eagerly looking forward to what his creative thumbprint looks like on that project. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways, it's not surprising. The people that worked on EverQuest Landmark are also working on Stars Reach, so it's got that Minecraft-esque feel to it as well. So it's taking things from other genres that worked, like the survival thing, which I think we're going to talk about a bit as well. The survival part of things is like a subsection of the MMO at this point, and taking some of that and reinvesting it into the MMO.
Makes a lot of sense in both comments of the STIX and Red. I want to kind of mine out some observations you've made. The MMO genre is in a funny place because we're at the point at which the genre functionally is apparent, in that it spun off survival genre. And even your point about Dune Awakening, it's this quasi, and we could debate about what constitutes an MMORPG, but it's this weird hybrid that mixes the two. And you could make the argument that survival genre was a response to what MMOs had become, because I think about early Ark, early Conan, Rust. These focused on more small community tensions and competition of resources, whether it's from a PvP. Hello, Kitty. Competition of resources or PvP in general. And those were the types of memories I fondly looking back that marked my obsession for a number of years with EverQuest, versus the selection factors from an MMO design perspective becoming more solo friendly. And that wasn't why I started playing MMOs. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. People can enjoy games for whatever reason they have. But with survival being a response to what MMOs, from a canonical genre perspective, I also see that mobile games are also a response, but not necessarily from a design perspective. I think it's more from an accessibility point of view. What I mean by that is, if someone's going to play even WoW, like, you need a tower computer. You kind of need a little bit to know how it works. You need a subscription. There are all these layers involved with it. And with a mobile game, the vast majority of them are free. It just works. It's easy. If you're at work and you need to use the restroom, you can log on for 5 minutes. It's just easy. Now, there's some cultural commentary that someone could make, but I think that the child genres that have been birthed, they're still intrinsically tied to the golden age of MMOs from an etymology point of view. But I think, interestingly, and I think there's some worth into considering why this is, but I think they're also corrections, maybe overcorrections, but I think they are responses to that WoW shadow, that post-golden age, what the genre had become.
Talking about survival games, though, and mobile games, what do you guys... Okay, I need your opinion here, because I'm sure you talk to other content creators that, you know, to me, we have different circles that we typically tend to be in. So a lot of the content creators that I've talked to that play MMOs, or that are now playing survival games, or are now playing mobile games or gacha games, they all came from MMOs as well. Like, I'd say 9 out of 10 of the content creators I know all came from MMOs. They all played an MMO over the last 15 years at some point. That's because, for the most part, gacha kind of came into existence like around, or became mainstream anyway, around like the 2017, 2020 period with Fate Grand Order, and then more recently Genshin Impact, which I'm sure you're both well aware of.
Yeah.
So I've discussed this topic, I think, probably ad nauseum at this point, but I ask every single person I know, like, have you played MMOs? If so, what did you play? And every single one has said, yeah, I used to play an MMO, and then I moved on to survival games, and then I moved on to gacha games. That seems to be a recurring theme. Almost every single person that has played MMOs or that covered MMOs have moved on to survival games and gacha games, or in some instances also RPG games, which I know Flynn has also done more recently, like the last year or two, and I know Mitch has transitioned over to doing as well. So what do you guys think about how gacha and survival games have kind of eclipsed the MMO genre? Because, and I've also asked this question too, what do they like about survival games and what do they like about gacha games? And another recurring sentiment here is that both respective genres seem to do what MMOs did, not entirely, but to some extent. So survival games, as an example here, they offer that kind of cooperative experience that MMOs offered. They have big open worlds. You can tackle things at your own pace, have a level of progression. But for the most part, they are competitive games that they can play with their friends, and that is what they loved in, or not competitive, cooperative games with their friends, and that is something they loved in MMOs. And with respect to gacha games, they take the RPG element, so like Genshin, more recently Wuthering Waves, they are large open worlds, they're single player experiences for the most part, but they take what made the RPG element, the leveling element, the dungeons, the rating systems, the complex gameplay and mechanics, and they implemented it into a game that you can play on the fly, you know, on the toilet, in your bed, whatever. So these two games have taken different aspects of what made MMOs popular and kind of integrated it into a subgenre, so to speak. And for the most part, like, and this is apparent by the numbers for every big survival and gacha game that's released, like, they have essentially taken apart the MMO genre and then put it back together, not entirely, but in a way that, you know, people that wanted this specific or enjoyed this specific facet of MMOs now can, you know, funnel their time and attention into. So what do you guys think about how gacha games and survival games have eclipsed them and have essentially replaced them for the most part?
I think you answered your own question. Oh, I'm sorry, Red.
Oh, you go for it. Go for it.
What happened in the post-WoW shadow of the MMO genre is that companies replaced worlds with systems, and we all as players recognize that, and that's not interesting. I don't want to be playing with a graphical spreadsheet. Survival games reversed back and put the world first. I still fondly remember, I had a buddy, I still do, who spent some 7,000 hours in Ark, and they released one of the new maps, and so he encouraged me to hop on for a couple play sessions. And I still remember the adventure we had trying to you had to get like a paddle and like beat baby dolphin or penguins. I know this sounds very, very strange, but you had to do that in order to get these types of feathers to craft a bow. And you had to travel all around the world. We're being chased by Tyrannosaurus Rex, and it's just an insane, absurd, like movie, unscripted adventure. And I had that in a survival game. That, like, I hadn't had that experience since playing on a private server with early EverQuest. Like, the last time I had a modern, like, whether it's, and I love Guild Wars 2, Final Fantasy 14, gorgeous games, but the last time I had one of those chaotic, unscripted, memorable, burned into your memory moments, I just really haven't had that since the WoW shadow replacing world with systems design doctrine overcame the ethos of what it meant to build an MMO. I have less experience with the gacha style, but I think what you said was right, that just like survival championed the world, gacha games champion the RPG. And the post-WoW shadow style also let that fall by the wayside too. What do you think, Red?
I think like it's interesting because, I mean, the survival games, funnily enough, my content creation actually started with Valheim. I decided to try streaming, and I streamed Valheim, and I was too scared to stream by myself. I had too much social anxiety about it, so I got a friend to come play with me. And it was that MMO-like experience. I mean, there's like an added layer to it of like the crafting and stuff, but that goes back to like Ultima Online and Star Wars Galaxies, when you made your own homes, you had your own homes and stuff. And like part of the biggest part of those games was like the housing and things like that were important to the game, not just DPS meters and pushing dungeon content, which it eventually became what MMOs are. Like, you're talking about the world going away. And I think so, like, these games, survival games, gacha games, have taken those pieces of an MMO, they've made them more accessible, they made them easier to go play and to put down, so you don't feel pressured. You don't feel the pressure to keep up necessarily as much as an MMO, because that can get to a point. I don't know if y'all ever did any like raiding or anything like that, but I did 4 years of raiding in EverQuest right before I started doing content, and it caused some strife. I've been with my wife we've now been together. I met her when I was 19, and it was like 10, 15 years into our relationship, and it caused issues because it was like 3 days a week we're gonna be raiding, and then it got to a point where like a year and a half of it, I wasn't even having fun. I was literally doing it out of a feeling of like necessity to the other, like a feeling of what's the word I'm trying to think of, like responsibility to the rest of the guild, because if I wasn't there, then they would struggle, so they needed me there. And so when it got to the point where I was playing a game out of responsibility, I was like, oh, this is not fun anymore. This is just doing it for other people. And I think survival games take that part away. Not all of them hit. I mean, there's a lot that fail. There are tons of survival games that I've wish listed, I've gone to see, and like they go nowhere. You know, they get 100 players, you know, whatever. And it's because a lot of them feel exactly the same. They're kind of in a lot of ways suffering, I think, from the same thing that happened with World of Warcraft, where they have this idea and they just keep doing it. And I think that now we're starting to see a little bit more innovation. Like Enshrouded is an interesting one where they're taking more of that Minecraft stuff, but also taking some of that RPG stuff and putting it together. And then just RuneScape decided, hey, you know what? Well, yeah, we have one of the most successful MMOs of all time. Let's make a survival game. And it has dragons. So, you know, and it's working. So it's a very interesting thing where I don't know that it'll ever replace the MMO genre, but it's definitely eating at the MMO genre. Like I think it's taking up a big part of it because it feels so similar, and you can have those co-op experiences. You can have those group experiences. Like Enshrouded, you literally form in a group and you go take on a dragon together, like a dragon creature thing. That's the MMO experience, the dungeon experience.
I think with regards to gacha games and survival games too, you also don't fall victim to the verticality of progression. But not only that, but also they also cater to a more casual player base, because you guys know that there are, you know, seasonal recurring there are recurring seasons in MMOs where every patch cycle there's a new set of gear you have to do, there are new raid bosses you have to fight, and they typically tend to last like 3-6 months. Once you've successfully acquired all your gear, you have like a set time before the next raid cycle comes, and then you have to grind all over again. If you miss a week, you miss a couple weeks, you fall drastically behind all of your friends. Whereas in a survival game, you kind of just stop and then restart where you left off. There's no falling behind. In gacha games, you just set it down. You can not play for 6 months. You come back and your characters, your gear and everything is just as relevant now as it was 6 months ago. In an MMO, if you stop for 6 months and you come back, you've missed 2 raid tiers. You're like 150 item levels behind. Yeah. You hit like a wet noodle. Like there is no way for you to catch up other than to grind relentlessly for weeks or months. So they definitely cater to a much more hardcore audience comparatively to survival games and gacha games, which cater to a casual audience. And with today's society, I think that is a lot more beneficial to them as players. Although that's just that's my perspective, playing survival games and gacha games a lot myself.
Well, I agree.
Oh, go ahead, Red. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, it's one of the things where I think, like, because I'm obviously a huge fan of the classic MMO, but like one of the crazy things about covering MMOs, which I'm sure y'all kind of know, is that you realize, like, oh, like as I'm covering all these MMOs, you realize the time you thought you would have to play the games, you don't actually have. You have no time. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, I want to actually like get into these classic MMOs, and then I start realizing, like, oh, I don't have time to enjoy these MMOs the way I want to enjoy these MMOs. And that's when a game like when I mentioned Stars Reach, which is aiming at a much shorter playtime, but also including things like horizontal progression, I think that's a way that you could maybe capture in some new players to the genre, and why a game like Guild Wars 2 has been able to continue to succeed, because it doesn't have a monthly sub. It has, you buy it once and you keep playing it, and it's more of a horizontal progression where you don't feel like I hadn't played in ages, and the main thing I felt like I was lacking when I came back wasn't a gear thing. I was like, oh, I need to go quest to get these mounts. Like you can jump back into the game and still feel part of the game, whereas you go into World of Warcraft, which I love, but I go to play PvP in WoW, mm-hmm. and I go into one thing and I'm just dead. Same with like ESO, I'm just dead. You know, like I can't do the thing because I haven't grinded enough to play the actual game. So it's like, here you have to do all this stuff before you can actually enjoy the game, and I think that pushes a lot of people away, and it kind of sucks.
Yeah, that's an unsolved design problem in MMOs. I think in part because even the architects of the genre early on didn't expect MMOs to last for 5 years, a decade, 2 decades. So if you build the first, let's just say 50 levels on a vertical progression basis, then if you simply stop at that point, then the player could feel misled in terms of, oh, well, I've had this somewhat of a dopamine response, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you suddenly switch the model at the end of the game, then you risk losing your most veteran players, so you don't want to do that. But then you get into the irony of WoW basically power resetting, which is a type of like functional horizontal progression anyways, because you're just like keep moving the ladder down and down and down. So Guild Wars 2 has a good model. I realize we're kind of shifting to thinking about the problems of what happens with the genre, or really with games that last for years and years and years. How do you solve that? Conqueror Online, I don't know if you guys have played that. D&D Online has a similar model where you can rebirth your character. So, and there's incentives for doing that. So after you've reached the top, you can start over again, but with benefits. So there's some interesting ideas that games have teased around, but it's still unsolved from a genre perspective because there's wildly different ways of doing it.
Wasn't that Chronicles of Valeria's whole thing that your character would die?
Yeah,
right.
that was true. Yeah.
Yes. Permadeath. Yeah. And I think Wizards Online or something, it closed down, but I think they had a permadeath structure too. And I guess that's basically a hardcore, classic WoW having a hardcore version.
Pantheon originally had an idea of a system called Progeny, which would basically be you turn in your character and you become a new character that has some built-in benefits and bonuses. You know, they had to descope that, but that was originally a plan, and EverQuest recently has done that, where you get max characters and then your lower level characters have a experience boost or something like that to it. So they're trying to solve those issues, but it's never ending. Mabinogi
has had a rebirth system in place for 15 years now. So it's essentially once you hit a certain level, you can rebirth yourself back down to level 1, and you as you continue to play Mabinogi, you age up as a character from a child model to an adult model, and then when you rebirth yourself back down, you reset yourself back down to a kid model again. So there's not only, you know, a statistical evolution of your character, but also a physical evolution of your character too. And they also allow for you to, through rebirthing, or at least the last time I played, unlock additional, I think it was either classes or races, I don't remember. So there was some kind of advantage to actually continuing to push to max level and then rebirth again. So, but so I guess that we don't, you know, drag this out too long. What do you guys think? Since I know Marl was discussing the what was wrong with the genre, what the genre, you know, like where it went wrong and everything. What do you guys think the genre could do right now to improve? Like one area that the genre, or one thing the genre could zone in on and focus in on to actually improve. Maybe, I don't know, recapture some lost audience, new audience. I mean, if you guys need a minute to think.
Just put me on the
Or I can go.
I think it's genreification, like going back to what MMOs were back in the early, you know, 1997 to about 2000, even like into 2004, because World of Warcraft itself was an innovation, right? And I think we lose that because it became the innovation and everyone just copied it. But WoW was an innovation. So going back to 1997 to 2004, where you have these smaller MMOs, but they're all doing something a little bit different. Because I think that's where a lot of people got lost in MMOs, is like, oh, it's an MMO, it's just this is what the game is. They know exactly what it is because every one of them is the same, they just have a slightly different skin to them. So I think going back to a place where you have developers innovating, but the problem with that means a lot less money going into those games. And then so you have to be willing to deal with basically shittier games. And I don't know that we'll ever get to a point where we are willing, because we have had the AAA polish. I mean, World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV have like incredible budgets. Like, and I mean, the fact that Star Citizen has almost $1 billion is ridiculous. But it's so we're looking at a place where I think you're going to end up with smaller MMOs, but I don't know if that's necessarily going to be sustainable if enough people have like the passion for those games. And if it's, you know, kind of like looking at different styles again. Like Palia is a good example of a very different type of MMO. It's I don't even know if they have combat yet. I mean, they may have. I think they added like ranged something or other.
Yeah, like archery.
But it's a very, archery. I think that's what they've added. But having very different styles of games so people can pick and choose, but also potentially, and as much as this hurts my soul to say this, having them be more transient, more temporary. Like you don't feel like you have to sit in an MMO for 5 years. EverQuest, when they made EverQuest 2 in 2004, thought that everyone would leave EverQuest and go play EverQuest 2. That was, and like, they actually thought that's what would happen. It obviously didn't. EverQuest 2 never even came close to the population of EverQuest 1. And so I think that we may need to start thinking about MMOs more in shorter terms. And if that happens, I think we can potentially have some kind of rebirth.
I don't think I have much to add. I think he hit the nail on the head in that there has to be a return to innovation. However, there are marketing pressures that make that complicated. In addition to that, we've had 20 years of saturation. This ties back to my claim, slightly hyperbolic, but objectively, the genre is at its best in terms of choice, in terms of accessibility. There's so many free options. We could have an argument about monetization, but compared to when I first played EverQuest, there was like 5 options total. Now there's thousands. And so there's this bizarre push and pull, this yin and yang dynamic in which those of us, I kind of feel like I'm becoming my own grandpa looking back on the good old days when we had to march through 2 feet of snow to get to school type of thing, in terms of the world's changed. And part of that is we, having grown up through that, have to come to peace with that, have to, I think, cherish the fact that we do have so many incredible options now. Yet at the same time, I don't think there's a contradiction with mourning that innovation hasn't existed for more or less 20 years, while also being okay, to Red's point, that there probably will be a return to smaller scoped indie MMOs with niche focuses, and thus a hyper-specific audience. And that's ultimately a market negotiation between, will that company make enough money to keep pursuing it? I think of like Embers Adrift, for example. Great development team. I've been able to talk with them. But they have to make that decision. Is it worth it to design a game based on these principles with these restrictions based on the income that's coming in?
All right. So basically what I'm hearing here is we're never going to get another major MMO release, unfortunately, as much as people want one.
I don't think we'll have a return to a new golden age. And part of that is because the golden age is defined by novelty. And because we've had 20 years of hindsight, I don't think there's going to be something that is systemically new. What I do think is going to happen is there are incredible improvements with respect to compute. So my day job, I'm a data center engineer. And what technology, what hardware can do now, what bandwidth from an OSI or networking perspective can accomplish is incredible. So I'm eagerly looking forward to Ashes of Creation, even though I'm cynical about it, Star Citizen, in terms of the tech that's available now for people to build universes that didn't exist 20 years ago. So on one hand, there is this horizon that is slowly coming up, that is ripe, pregnant with opportunity. Someone has to seize it.
I know you think that you just hit the end of the video, and technically, yeah, you have. And I know your first reaction is to close out of it at this juncture, but don't. No, instead, I urge you to take a moment here and click one of the videos on screen that are coming up in just a moment, so you remain up to date with everything going on in the gacha genre. Trust me, you are not going to regret doing so. Stay flaccid.